Welcome to the Being Known podcast with my friend, Dr. Kurt Thompson.
And my friend, Pepper Sweeney.
We are here to discover and explore what it means to be truly known. Hey, Kurt.
Hey, Pep.
You know, one of the ways I'm talking to the most beautiful listeners in the world right now, and one of the ways that you all aren't privy to, but one of the ways that we are practicing being known is, you know, we just spent a nice, long, leisurely time in conversation and in sharing and checking in, Kurt and I and Amy, and it almost feels like I'm getting away with something when we take that time.
That's
but
awesome.
it is really it's really incredible to get to have that time with you, and so thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Today we are in this series about rupture and repair, and today we are in episode 12 of Rupture and Repair, and we are going to be talking about, this is actually part 2 of the repair in community, rupture and repair in community, and today we're going to be specifically talking about the church.
Mm-hmm.
So fasten your seatbelts.
Yeah. Well, I think at some point, Pepper, as I was thinking about this, we have the ground we've covered so far is, we've talked about rupture and repair in general terms, like we all kind of get it that we need it. We long for repair of rupture. We've talked about what rupture looks like, the different forms of it. We've talked about what basic fundamentals of repair look like if we're doing that individually, and we've talked about the general terms of it, I think. And now I think what we're doing is we're really and even including the interpersonal neurobiology of it, and why repair in community is so important because of what it does, even as far as our brain reconstruction and the renewal of neural networks and all those kinds of things, and relational mass effect and all the things that we've talked about so far that are important. And I think what we are doing now is we've done all that work in some respects as helping get us ready for what we're now going to do, because in some respects we would say, if you look at the entire arc of the biblical narrative, it's a story of one big repair of rupture. Like the whole story, like this is what we are about. So much of what we do in any kind of healthcare provision, pastoral provision, like every time we create beauty and goodness in the world, we are saying to evil, you don't get to win.
Right.
Repair is here. And this is what it looks like. And the thing is, when it comes to the biblical narrative, the church is the ultimate space where heaven and earth come together, where this takes place. And so it would make sense that naturally we would come, after all of our kind of preliminary work in some respects, we come to this space where the church represents the coming of Jesus into the world, and then his developing his community, who he then sends out into the world to be repairers of ruptures, even and also continue to bear God's image as rupture repairers in the same way that we were bearing God's image in the first 2 pages of the Bible. And so naturally the church is the place where repair is first. It is imagined most powerfully. It is imagined most beautifully, most durably. And of course, it is the place where repair is often most desperately needed within it, because of the nature of what we are as the church.
Yeah.
So I just want to acknowledge that there will be many of our listeners on our time today who might be waiting for what are we going to talk about today, because this is a big deal. I mean, how many people who are listening who have suffered at the hands of the church?
Right.
The very place where we all come to be most vulnerable. We come to be loved. We come to love. We come to open our hearts to intimacy in the deepest possible way, to be healed and recommissioned, only to find that the very opposite happens.
Yeah, and it's like if a stranger hurts me in an emotional way, it's I can brush it off. But
Right.
if I come to you and someone that I'm vulnerable with and that I love, and you hurt me, that cuts deep.
Yeah.
That cuts deep.
Yeah. So we want to acknowledge that the church, as both as the place of greatest resource for the repair of rupture, is also the place where some of the most profound ruptures have also taken place. And it is fashionable in our culture to then leave the church or step away from the church and talk about the church as the church did this to me, or the church, happened to me. And so it is no longer a place where I can be comfortable and confident. I would, we use I don't feel safe there, that kind of language we use. And we want to say that, we want to say two things: that we want to be really sensitive to and we are sympathetic to, empathic with the wounds that have happened, while simultaneously acknowledging that we cannot get away from the reality that the church is where God's mission is most powerfully taking place, and from which his mission most powerfully takes place. We can't get away from that. So a couple things just to bear in mind. There are some resources to begin that we want people to be aware of. My friend and colleague Diane Langberg has a couple of pieces out called Redeeming Power. That's one book that she has, and another book that she has, When the Church Harms God's People. Those are two resources from Diane Langberg. And also my friend and colleague Chuck DeGroat has a book called When Narcissism Comes to Church. We have actually named these two folks and named their work before, but those are three resources that I would highly commend and recommend for us to dive into for further reading. The next thing we want to say, though, is just as a quick reminder about, when we talk about the church, just to begin with, what is a metaphor for us to consider? We've talked about this on past episodes as well, and we have to be reminded that the church is like a field hospital. Mm-hmm. It's like a MASH unit.
Yeah. And
this is the place where all the wounded come. And we have to remember that it's not a coincidence that some of the most dangerous, some of the most lethal infections that emerge in human beings do so in hospitals, because this is where all of us are who are sick.
Yeah.
And some of us who are sick are the healthcare providers.
Right.
The physicians and nursing staff and techs and so forth, people who are in positions of authority have their own unrepaired ruptures that they bring to the table. And so it is important for us to remember that at the same time that we come to a hospital for the things that we need, and that's where we go. You're not going to have your gallbladder taken out out here on Langston Boulevard.
No,
you're going to have it done. Yeah. Hopefully,
hopefully not.
Hopefully,
yes.
I hope I don't go out there and watch that happening later this afternoon.
Yeah, that reminds me of there was a story years ago that a woman was getting ready to have a baby, and she ended up at the hospital, but she was too late, and so she had the baby on the front lawn of the hospital, and she got delivery room charges. And she disputed them, and so they sent them back as greens fees.
Oh my God!
They're going to get them one way or another.
Okay, that hurt me.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So here's something else, though, to bear in mind.
Yeah.
That the church being what it is, we have this idea of idealism. We have it, and the church is not where this phenomenon began, where the place that is the most holy, the place that where renewal takes place, where new birth takes place, where all those things take place. The church from the time of Jesus on is not the first place that this happened. The first time it happened was in Genesis chapter 3. Genesis chapter 3, Eden is like a temple. The garden is this place where good things are supposed to happen. Intimate things are supposed to happen. And what happens? This is where the serpent shows up. He wasn't just wandering out there in the wilderness, waiting for Adam to maybe like wander out there with him and then have a conversation with him. No, he's right in the center of the temple. And we could talk an awful lot about this, but it is important for us to know like that these things happen in the church is not just like a feature of modernity. It's not just a feature of the last 20 years.
Right.
It's not just a feature of the Catholic Church or the Protestant Church or the Orthodox. It is what it means to be human.
I was going to say it's a human feature. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it happened in Eden. We who are so committed to individualism in the West, we contribute to it because I'm not aware of how powerful the community can be, both for good but also for ill. I also am not aware that the church is a place where God tests us and refines us. He's trying to turn us into professional human beings. And the only way that he can do that is by mixing us together with other human beings. This is what was happening in the Garden of Eden in order to turn us into people of wisdom, practicing for heaven, developing earned and therefore secure attachment. And we also have to recognize that we can't escape the role of authority and authorship and leadership in all of these kind of situations. We move from Eden, and when you look at Leviticus, if you look at the biblical model that's running from Genesis all the way to Leviticus, God is not unaware of what humans will do to each other, right in the middle of his temple. I mean, this is the risk that he takes. If we are going to be rulers, if this is what we're made to do. Now, if we all just want to be paramecium, if we all just want to be slaves, if we all just want to be mindless creatures that do not become sons and daughters, then you're probably not going to have to worry about it. I'm guessing most earthworms are not really worrying about like whether or not they're going to get run over by a car tire.
Right.
Now, when they do, I don't think that they even know that it happened. But if you want to be a human, then we have to be aware that God is in the business of turning us into people. Now, why are we saying all this? Because this whole, if you look at Leviticus, we like all these laws and all this ruling. Like, look, God is doing this to draw our attention. He's trying to get us ready to be with him, to be close to him. The Hebrew word for offering, we can bring your offering, is to come close. Come close. Come close. When Jesus says, all of you are weary and heavy laden, come close to me. Come close. But we have to be aware that if I'm going to come close, I have to be ready to do business. I don't come close and then just only on my terms. I have to be vulnerable and open and all those kinds of things. And I'm going to need to be aware that leadership creates and curates space for goodness and beauty, but that means it's also going to reveal my immaturity, my underdevelopment. And we have to be attuned to our corporate mission for formation and practicing for heaven. That's why we need, I got to have embodied proximity. I got to be close to each other. You know, when we've been hurt by the church, the first thing I want to do is just leave.
Right.
And somehow I think that if I just leave, I can continue to grow. When in fact, it's not possible. I need to have embodied proximity. Growth featured first as a function of integration of the community. Right? This is what we mean by growth in the church is it's a function of this bringing together of a community, the community that is here. And that includes like people that I wish weren't there. I love the way, Dallas Jenkins and the other writers of, who are doing the work on The Chosen. You see Jesus bringing together all these disparate characters who really don't like each other. Like for real, dude.
Right.
Like he's not bringing like you, me, and Amy together.
Yeah.
He's bringing people together who really don't like each other, and he's not just like making them all no, like who what are they? Now, that's different than people being wounded, people being ruptures taking place. But we have to recognize that that growth for me personally is necessarily going to be connected to my deepening connection to you in this community. And leadership always has to be attuned to all these things. And they have to be attuned to the 4 S's that we've talked about. Leadership has to be aware that spiritual formation and growth is always going to be a function of being seen, soothed, safe, and made secure. And so the whole notion then that leadership has a responsibility for these things in this way, and that they often don't take care of that business. Just to acknowledge, they don't take care of that business because of their own unrepaired ruptures. And then we have to be reminded that the rupture and repair as a function of being in a hospital lives off Jesus' words in John 16:33 that in this world you will have tribulation, and tribulation is even going to find you in the church. But be of good cheer, for I have overcome the world. We're going to come back to that at the very end of our time. And so it's important for us that when we gather as people together in the church, that we have to be prepared for side effects. It's like any intervention that a physician gives to a patient. If I'm going to give a medication or do a surgical intervention, we have to say it's important for you to know what the side effects are. If you want to come and be a member of this place, we're going to do everything we can to create a place of safety for everyone. But we know that just like being in a home, to be safe does not mean you will never be injured. But it does mean that when injury occurs, we're going to fix it. And we know that that's not always easy in churches. And so then when it comes to what this means, but in a hospital, right, this is, they have, in surgery, they have what we call I love this phrase, the morbidity and mortality board, the M&M board. Right. I don't know if we've talked about this before.
We've talked about the M&M board.
The M&M board, right, where every Monday or Tuesday, the panel publicly, right, reviews all the bad things that have happened in the hospital, especially in surgical interventions in the last week. And who wants to go there, right? Yeah. To have here's Johnny's test, and he got a C. Let's talk about all the mistakes that Johnny made. It's not like that, but it is the intention. They need to look like where can we be better? Where are we want to be better? We have to be aware that these are kinds of things that we want to name, and so we name that in the hospital, in the church, things will happen. We have to be prepared to name them. And so where ruptures have occurred, and they occur in all kinds of ways. They occur between parishioners, and sometimes they occur between parishioners in such a way that people in leadership never find out about it, and people just leave the church, or they just live with the simmering anger or hurt. But as we talked about in our last episode, this whole spirit of Matthew chapter 18, verses 15 through 17, where Jesus basically says, if somebody sins against you, you go to them. And if they won't hear you, then you take somebody else. And then if they won't hear you, you take more people. And then if they won't hear you, we're going to take this public and do this. There is a practical protocol for this. And the spirit of this, though, I know that there are plenty of places where people just look at that passage of Scripture and they kind of use it as a battering ram. Mm-hmm. Well, you didn't do that, so I'm bringing George. Yeah, 2 years ago, he was the heavyweight champion of the world.
Right.
He's brought you a pair of gloves, and he's got a pair of gloves, and
I'm going to bring a gang of people that all want to take my side in this situation, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So leaders bear the responsibility for being a non-anxious presence that shepherds the repair of ruptures within the parish or the congregation, in which those who are involved in that rupture are unable to effectively repair it without assistance. If you can't repair it, we need leaders who are able to come into the presence and provide a non-anxious presence. And once again, we are always reminded that the church is a system. As a hospital, it's a system. And the system, all systems in the world, are modeled after the family. And parents who oversee their children who are repairing ruptures, when their children aren't able to do that, require that the parents themselves are in a good place. We've said this before, that Cain and Abel have their conflict not just because of what's going on between them, but because Adam and Eve have unfinished business that they didn't take care of. when things are happening in the church and leaders are not doing what they need to do, it's not just because they're not behaving well as leaders, it's because they have their own unrepaired ruptures. And so we have to be prepared to name the ruptures and to name them comprehensively, thoroughly. We have a model that we do in couples therapy, that we use in couples therapy, in which where there has been a rupture and they're going to work toward repairing this, and one party says, when you did this, I felt this, and the party who's the offending party might say, okay, I hear that, I see that, I feel that makes sense to me. Is there more? Is there more? Like, this is the question that nobody wants to ask. Is there more? Because, like, please let there not be more. But we have to recognize that even in asking, is there more? The asking, is there more, is a movement of repair.
Right.
It's an act of great vulnerability. I'm willing to hear even more that I did.
Yeah. It's a posture of humility and vulnerability, right? I mean, it's
right.
It's setting the stage for helping the other person know they're being heard, and that you don't want to just stop there. You want to hear all of it. Yeah. Right.
And so we want to find a way, and we can say to our listeners, look, we recognize that, we could probably take this one episode and do 10 episodes.
Right.
If we want to do a thoroughly deep dive on all the possible iterations and tactics and so forth, and maybe someday down the line we might come back around and do that, but can't do all that here today. But once again, we want to pay close attention to this notion of the physics of relational mass effect. So what I mean by that is, we can have individuals that hurt other individuals in the church. But particular individuals who represent the church, so pastors or priests or elders, find that it's not just an individual, it's an office then, right? There is this sense of relational mass effect that can take place. I'm not just wounded by a person, I'm wounded by a person that represents certain things. At the same time, when it comes to naming these things, it's crucially important for us to name real people that have done real things. And we'll come back to that in just a moment. We have to recognize that, when groups hurt other groups, and how often do we have people who were in one group in a church, and we imagine that there is another group, but we don't actually talk with those people? So we're making stuff up in our head. And so we've been wounded by a group that may or may not actually even exist, because all this is happening in the privacy of my own mind and maybe the one or two other people that I'm talking about, which I'm making stuff up. Mm-hmm. Now, that doesn't mean that what I'm imagining isn't at all close to being true, but it's a testimony to how we are keeping ourselves distant. It's not embodied proximity. And so we have to realize that, like, all of this can lead to disintegrated states, but it also raises the potential for integrated states. It also raises the possibility for healing to take place. And so we recognize that communities within a church, different groups that we perceive that exist within a church, that community can wound other people. Those who are in power can wound other people. And what we have to recognize, we've said that we're paying close attention to these physics of relational mass effect, where rupture has occurred in the context of a community or happened publicly. It must be repaired publicly. I think I may have mentioned this in our last episode. We were having a gathering of our small group, and I said something to one of my friends. I said something in a way that was hurtful. I hurt their feelings, and because what I said was I shouldn't have said it the way that I said it. I was hurt, and I had a longing as well. My words came out in a way that were not okay.
Right.
And the temptation for me is to go back and just have a private conversation with this person and say, I'm really sorry. I screwed that up. I should have done that. Because all I want to do is just talk to this one person. But It didn't happen in private. It happened in public.
Right.
And so I actually have to go back and repair the public rupture.
Right.
That took place. When
and can and so you went to this person in front of the group, and you did a repair there in the room, right?
With the person,
but there was repair happening with the whole group.
Yeah, and then I had to explicitly say, but I realize it's not just with you. I realize, and I have to look at everybody else in the room.
Wow.
And say, everybody else was right here when I said this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it wasn't okay for you to witness it or hear it. It's not okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, I don't want to do that.
One of the things that it brings to my attention is the times where I've gone to, like, if I've said something or gotten short or whatever with, like, one of my kids, and I've gone back to them and apologized to them, which I've done multiple times. Mm-hmm. But there's a part of me that's like, if I did that in front of my other kids, I need to go to them and say, what the same thing you just did, I need to do with them too. Yeah.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah, because if you don't, then you're going to have happen what happened to me. I don't know if I've told this story. We've been doing this long enough now that I can't remember all the stories that I've told.
It's so funny.
It's one time, right? So I'm like, I was responsible for cooking dinner, like, on the one night that Phyllis trusted me to do this, because we otherwise know, like, otherwise it's just going to be takeout. And I was late getting started, and in my kind of rush to get started, my kids were Nathan might have been 10, Rachel was 13 probably, and they're there, and Phyllis was out, and she's coming home. I'm getting dinner ready, but I got started late. I'm like, okay, I'm going to be in the doghouse because I got started late.
Yeah.
And the kids were helping me, right? They were helping doing some things. And at one point, I spoke harshly to Nathan about something that he wasn't doing quickly enough, right? Have I told you this?
I don't think so.
I want to do it quickly enough. And Rachel says, Dad, look, I don't think he deserves that. I think you're upset with him because we were late getting started. You were late getting started, and now you're upset. And this doesn't really. I think that you owe him an apology. And I want to say to her, who has been parenting you?
I want to talk to that person.
Where's your mother? I need to talk to your mother.
Right.
And she was absolutely right. She's absolutely right. And okay. So there is this thing, like these public things have to be done, have to be repaired publicly, where leaders have wounded their congregation or parish members, and you can wound people by doing things that aren't even explicitly directed at them. Mm-hmm. You're a pastor, you have an affair. You're not just wounding your wife or your kids, you're wounding your whole congregation. Mm-hmm. You're a pastor, you're a leader who is, a bit narcissistic and a bit harsh. That exudes throughout the entire body. And so when elders want to gather around the pastor and say, hey, we have some repair work. There is this thing that you're about. We want you to wrestle with. And of course, part of the challenge is that elders themselves are afraid to do this sometimes because they themselves have their own unrepaired ruptures and their insecure attachments and so forth. And no, it's like the pastor doesn't just say, like, I have not treated my this person well or this person well. Like, no, like this, like we have to discern, like, how far into the system does this go? Because I can guarantee it's going. Yeah. Often in places that we don't know. And this is why when we have been, this is just referring to this a little earlier in our time, just to say, it is easy for those of us who have been wounded by the church to use that language. I have church hurt, or the church hurt me. And we and there's all kinds of conversation on the internet and everywhere else about a thing called the church. And it's easy for us to do that because it does not require me to name names. It does not because as soon as I start to name names, then I have to confront what it is that I want to do about a particular person. Now, this is not to say that there aren't systems involved, But it is crucially important that when we say, yeah, I was hurt by the church, we're going to want to hear who's the person we're talking about that actually hurt you. Because there is a real person, and there is a real event, and they really did say certain things or didn't say certain things or didn't protect you from certain things and so forth and so on. And so at the same time that we are talking about the church, when it comes to repair, like we cannot remain in a posture in which we just talk in general abstractions. So repair must include real people who then we would hope would be able to come in a spirit of humility and say, this is what I did to you. I'm sorry that I hurt you. You know, it's easy for us to say, like, I'm sorry that you felt hurt. Like, no.
Right.
That's so irresponsible.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that I hurt you. Tell me what it was like for you when I did that. That makes complete sense that you would have felt that way. What else do you want to say about what I did? You did not deserve that from me. You deserve better from me. I will not let this happen again. Repair is not going to reflect, I'm sorry your feelings were hurt. I'm sorry that you feel that way. This is a classic. Well, that's not what I intended.
Right.
As if I, all I need to say is like, because that's not what I meant to do, therefore somehow this shouldn't be a problem.
Right.
Leaders can rupture relationships indirectly because of their office. We've said this, and must be prepared to repair those ruptures accordingly. And here's the thing. Leaders sometimes require others to responsibly initiate repair on behalf of those whom the leader has wounded.
Explain what you mean by that.
There will be systems in which elders need to go to the pastor and say, "This is what you've done." And you're not going with hammer and tongs, but you're going with loving kindness, but you're going with intention and conviction. This is what you've done, and this is the repair that must be made. People who are on the lower side of the power gradient in any system sometimes will need other people to gather around them to then go to the people who have greater power and say, This is what has happened. This is what we need you to do. Mm-hmm. And this is what's so hard for us, because sometimes people will go to the people who are in a relative position of power to do this, and they won't take any action.
Right.
And this is when people will find themselves leaving.
Yeah.
And so I just want to say that this whole notion of how we do this in the church is crucially important, because we like to imagine that the church is a place where we come, we are redeemed by Jesus, we are all working hard, worshiping Jesus, responding with love and kindness to everybody, and then we all leave the church after the service and we go into the world to preach the good news, to become icons of beauty and goodness in the world. What we don't recognize is that, and it was Jesus' idea that we set this up, this is the way it's set up, that the church is actually the place where the ruptures are being repaired. It's not like, we don't have to do that here. The ruptures are out there in the world. It is the world that looks at the church and says, oh my goodness, look how they love one another. And that does not only translate into, look how nice they are to each other. Look how only kind they are to each other. Look how only peaceful they are with each other. No, it's like, oh my gosh, look at the fight that they had and look how they worked it out.
Right.
Look at how this person hurt this other person's feeling and they came with humility and sought forgiveness. Oh my gosh, it's not just that this horrible infection breaks out in the hospital. It's like, oh my gosh, look what they did to go get it. That's what the world's looking at. Like Jesus does not expect the world to look at the church and say, like, my gosh, like just a pristine, beautiful building. No, the world walks in and sees blood on the floor. Mm-hmm. Because it's a hospital. The question is, are we aware that this is what we are? And that we come to church And we learn that Jesus is forming us in the very crucible of what we do in response to the ruptures that occur in the hospital. Sometimes we want to get away from that. We've talked already about just certain rules of engagement, about how repair works. We've talked about that. Those things all apply here. It's also easy that we can spiritually bypass things. We want to toss scriptures at things. We want to overemphasize spiritual growth just as such. Oh, this is just about your spiritual growth. We shouldn't have to repair a rupture. We misuse prayer and the use of scripture. And you should just read this passage, or you should just pray about that. No matter how we describe it, all rupture and repair is by its very nature spiritual, and we don't want people bypassing this. We don't want people coming to us and saying, well, as it turns out, we think if you just prayed about this a little more, go read this text. No, this is Jesus inviting us to do the very, very hard work of why he came here. This is to redo Eden and the rupture that took place in Eden that was not repaired. This, in the church, is the place where, the ruptures are going to happen, and this is a place where we're going to go get it. We're going to we're going to do the work, which is hard for us to do. And let me just say, we're not saying, by all means, I want to say this, that there are those systems, those churches in which abuse continues unmitigated and unhinged, and by all means, do not remain where these kinds of things are not being taken care of. By all means. So we're not just saying, kind of like a battered wife, you just need to kind of like stay and pray about it. We're not saying that. There are places from which it's necessary for people to depart, from which they need to depart.
Yeah, but Kurt, I just want to say to you that I'm also, I'm hearing you speak to, I'm hearing these words that you're saying that are also speaking to church and church leadership and giving guidance as to, how we are meant to be as a church and how, I mean, I've been involved in two churches that there were major splits involved and all these things. And I wish that we could have had conversations like you're saying, that people would have come to the table with vulnerability and humility and at least tried.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So just coming full circle back again to John 16:33. These things I have spoken to you, that in me you will have peace. In the world you have tribulation, but be of good cheer and take courage. I have overcome, I have conquered the world. These are the words of Jesus that we want to take with us even as we now consider our application.
Yeah, Kurt, I would love if you would start us in the application, and then I just want to join in with some thoughts on it.
So we usually have a time where we, you, our listeners, we give you things to reflect on, think about, and then write about some kind of behavioral thing to do that often largely involves your thinking mind. Mm-hmm. But we really felt like this was an opportunity for us to, we can take all the things that you've heard from this episode and would love for you to simply enter into a time of reflection by meditating on a particular offering of artistic expression. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This is not for you to kind of like somehow take all the things that we've been talking about and sift it out and figure out what am I going to... No, we want you, having heard all this, because we assume that our listeners, stories are coming up for us, for you, our listeners. Yeah. And we want you to be wrapped around by, contained by, held by the beauty that we believe that God wants to bring to all of us who are working to be repairers of rupture, all of us who long for repairs of ruptures that we sometimes, some of us think like are never going to be repaired.
Right.
And one of the ways that we enter into that is by sensing our God coming to us in the form of a particular piece of artwork. Mm-hmm. And maybe, Pepper, you would have something more to say to us about that.
Well, I definitely want to talk about a music piece that we want to lead people towards in this next week, and that is Johann Sebastian Bach's the St. Matthew Passion, number 2, particularly. This was composed for Good Friday service, actually, in 1727.
Wow.
And the title translates to "Come, ye daughters, help me lament." So this really sets the tone and the journey through the suffering of Christ, when they played this at the Good Friday services. Mm-hmm. So, I find that this music is, it's layered. There's a double chorus going on with a choir, and it almost has like a processional feel to it. And there's sort of a weeping quality to it as well. And then there are these interwoven kind of melodies that have kind of a communal feeling to it as you listen to it. And so as you listen to this piece, I just want you to notice how the music carries both sorrow and beauty, and the tension that there is in that, and resolution. And I want to ask you to ask the question, where do you see Jesus' presence in this? Where do you sense his presence in this? And what does it stir in you? And then we would like you to journal on that. And at the same time, we would love for those of you who maybe are more visual, we would love to offer a painting to you. And Kurt, do you want to introduce that? Caravaggio, correct?
Yeah, it's Caravaggio, and it is the title is "The Incredulity of Thomas." And it's one of my favorite pieces. Just speaks to me, and I think this whole notion of Jesus inviting Thomas. So if you Google that, we'll have that in the show notes where a link for that. If you just have the sense that Jesus, you'll notice in the painting that Jesus is directing Thomas's hand into his side. Yep. That Jesus is all about repair. This is not just about proving something to Thomas. Right. This is about repairing Thomas's own wounded heart. And this notion that Jesus wants to do that for us as well. Yes. And I absolutely love this painting. We've talked about it before. And as I said, if you're someone that's more visual, maybe that's what you do. But I plan to have the music playing and sitting with the painting at the same time. And, that's a great idea. And seeing what comes up and journaling about it, and then I will share with you and Amy, what I experienced and what I sensed from that. So, yeah. All right, Kurt. Thank you for today. Every subject that we talk about isn't always easy, but necessary. Yeah. And I appreciate your sensitivity, your kindness, and your wisdom. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, stick around. The amazing Amy Cella is joining us.
I'm joining as soon as you let me in the room.
Yes, I am.
The amazing Amy Cella. Wow. Oof. Okay, you said it, Kurt, but I was thinking it as the episode was going on, to just, and I'll say it again, when we are talking about rupture and repair, especially in the church, we are not talking about abuse within the church. Like, we're not asking people stay in abuse. That's right. It's vastly different. That is not this. This is rupture and repair, just as it is in other. Well, and I think I would say, and we're going to get to this in a future episode, because we're going to talk about
ruptures that are not repairable. And we'll circle back to
Right.
this because we're in abusive settings. There are certain ruptures that take place where where one party often in particular is not capable of that repair, and that's a different kind of action that we need to take.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead, Pep.
No, I was just there were probably leadership that I've seen where the leaders were not capable of, unfortunately, of even seeing that there was that they had caused a rupture.
The need.
And
Yeah.
Because of their own unresolved
of their own unresolved
Right.
ruptures.
the
Absolutely.
whole hurt people,
Yeah.
hurt people.
That's right.
Unresolved, ruptured people,
That's
ruptured
right.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it struck me the idea, like our urge, especially within a church, if there's rupture, to leave, and not just because we leave. Like in other areas of life, if our friends rupture us, we don't typically leave. We physically we don't leave the relationship necessarily, but we leave emotionally.
Yeah.
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 But which you can never, like if you're with a friend and you feel like they have like cut you off, you
Right.
can try to have a conversation. But the physicality of leaving is a severance, right? It's just
Right. Well, I think you bring up a really good point, Aim, because I think this happens in church a lot. Where there are all kinds of ruptures in which people leave the relationship, but they don't leave the church. The church is big enough that it can absorb the rupture, and people just stop talking to each other. Or because there's there's 1,000 people that come to the church, or there's 400 people that come to the church. I can hide in the woodwork. One of the things that we've seen about these confessional communities is that when ruptures happen in the communities, like, you can't hide from it.
right.
Right? And people like to come to these confessional communities hoping that, like, this will be great for my growth and so forth and so on, until they discover that, like, they're really angry at the other person across the room, and like, this is why you have come.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Yes.
Yeah.
And it struck me, and we can wrap on this, but the idea of our posture towards rupture and repair. Like, just as we've been talking about in previous episodes, of like welcoming, actually wanting, that the same can be true in the church. Like, our posture can be that there's not going to be rupture, but there's going to be rupture.
Right. I am struck by Jesus' confidence. I am the way and the truth and the life. He's not just making this declaration as if, like, I am this, and so you better get your act together. It's this sense of, like, no, therefore come to me. Like, I am the repairer of ruptures. And then he turns to his disciples and he says, like, y'all go and do the same thing. And I'm like, look, you're talking to me. And that's right. You go into your day and you're looking for the person who cuts you off in traffic. You're looking for the uptick in anxiety because, like, it's that you have when you interact with somebody that's some rupture that's happening at some. I want you to go find them. This is what the gospel is about. I came looking for Adam, and Adam would not have a conversation with me. He throws his wife under the bus. I've been looking for people ever since I was looking for Adam.
Yeah.
And so, can I just say, as we wrap, I just want to say that I'm so grateful that in the two of you, I have two friends who come looking for me. I'm just really grateful for that. Like, it lets me, we do this recording, and my day will be categorically different. It will allow me to go look for ruptures to repair. Because they'll be there.
Yeah.
That is for sure.
For sure. Yeah.
To be continued. There's
So much.
so
Well
much.
done, Kurt. This was great.
Yeah.
Love you guys.
You too.
Love you too.
Alrighty.
All right.
This podcast is produced by Kurt Thompson, Pepper Sweeney, and myself, Amy Chella. Audio production and editing is by Keaton Simons. Video production and editing is done by Mark Gould. If you'd like to connect with us, you can find us on social media at BeingKnownPod. If you like this podcast, tell a friend. If you love this podcast, tell everyone you know. And please like, rate, and review wherever you listen. Be well, be known.